Well, let's now head to South Africa, where the government is being urged to address pressing economic woes with urgency. The call was made by the Free Market Foundation following the reveal by Statistics South Africa on Tuesday that real GDP increased by a paltry 0.4% in the second quarter of 2024. The FMF argues that whilst improved investor confidence and heightened optimism following the May elections should have a positive impact on economic growth in the future releases, such a boost will be short-lived if the government of national unity cannot act swiftly to address the structural hindrances to growth in South Africa. The FMF warns that unless parties to the GNU begin to reform the policy environment rapidly, they run the risk of squandering the goodwill that has been shown towards the new government. This could spell doom for the coalition in 2029. To discuss this, I'm being joined by Dr. Morné Malan, Deputy Head of Policy at the Free Market Foundation. Thanks for joining us all the way from Johannesburg in South Africa. How would you, first off, assess the current economic climate in South Africa, and what are the key indicators that highlight economic woes?
Yes, well, I think in these sorts of matters, one always has to take a bit more of a long-term view. And the fact is that the South African economy has been stagnating for over a decade now. If you look at, rather than looking at overall GDP, if you adjust for the amount of the population and you adjust for the effect of inflation and those sorts of things, then you'll see that GDP per capita is actually virtually the same today as it was in 2008. And with a growing population, but GDP remaining stagnant, the obvious outcome, or the only real outcome one could expect, is for unemployment to also grow. So you've got GDP per capita stagnating, or at times even declining. Obviously, the next measure is also going to be unemployment, which since 2008, once again, unemployment is up by at least 10 percentage points. It's at around 30, just under 35% today, whereas it was in the mid-20s at that point. And even worse than that is the unemployment amongst youth, which today is at around 50% of young people who can't find jobs. And these are the 50% of those seeking jobs. But I think the overall indicator is actually the gross fixed capital formation, which is a sort of a measure of not only the short-term confidence of investors, but the willingness of investors to invest for the long term. So this is investing in far more tangible, concrete kind of projects, and that has dried up. That has remained either stagnant or has declined for at least a decade at this point. So where we are today, yes, I know there is some optimism regarding the fact that we managed to, in some sense, dodge a recession, but we can't be too sanguine about the actual state of the economy, which really hasn't improved much either over the short term, and over the long term has actually gotten quite a bit worse given the other factors involved.
All right. But what are the short and medium term growth projections for South Africa's economy, and what factors are indeed driving those projections as well?
Yeah, look, regarding the projections going forward, as we alluded to in our press release earlier, and I think you mentioned it in your introduction, there are some positive signs over the short to medium term. If looking at the exchange rate, for example, the rand has improved roughly 5% versus the US dollar over the past year. Bond yields for the South African government bonds, both in the short term and in the long term, have gone down, which shows that people do have a bit more confidence. They've actually gone down quite significantly, which shows that people do believe that South Africa is less risky an investment as it had been prior to the election. And the stock market's also performing reasonably well. But beyond those measures, on the ground, we also see some improvements in particularly the state-owned entities. So Eskom, we've had quite a bit of relief from load shedding, and there are some positive signs at other SOEs as well, such as Transnet, and fixing those network industries would be absolutely essential to driving economic growth. So there are, in the short term, maybe even in the medium term, some positive some positive indicators, but the problem with those indicators are that they're mostly driven by sentiment, whether it's the exchange rate, even the stock market, bond yields certainly. Those are mostly driven by sentiment, and investors are more confident today, but investors can be quite fickle. So we need to actually utilize the positive sentiment, and we have to see real tangible reform. And so far, we have not really seen any attempts by the new government, the government of national unity, to bring about that reform. And as such, we've also not seen that gross fixed capital formation. There's no real indication that those longer term investments are starting to be made. And we believe that those will only really be seen when we have real change on the policy side.
All right. Thank you so much, Dr. Morné Malan, Deputy Head of Policy, FMF, for joining us.
Thanks for the opportunity.